Thanks for listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. Don't forget to listen live on accesswdun.com and join my Substack at Martha Zoller with free and paid subscriber content exclusive to you. Follow me on X at Martha Zoller and join me every day. It is so great to have back in the studio here with us Justin Giboney from the AND campaign. Justin, thank you so much for coming and visiting with us.
Always glad to be here, Martha. Thanks for having me.
So give us an update on the AND campaign. Tell people what it is and what you're working on right now.
Sure. The AND campaign is a Christian civic organization, and we are in the middle of our civic revival tour. So we're going all around the country to churches, conventions, things like that, and giving people 10 disciplines that'll help Christians get through this election cycle in a constructive way, regardless of who you're voting for, to get through it in a constructive way that glorifies God.
So what are some of those disciplines?
So one of them is seeing people and not political abstractions. You know, everybody is more than their vote. And so even if you disagree with their vote, you still need to see the human dignity within them. Another one is having media hygiene, making sure that you're listening to diverse voices that are credible and intellectually honest, so that when you make a decision, you actually have good information to make it with.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the media hygiene, because I was telling folks that we had a little family gathering this weekend, and we have a very diverse group of people within our family. My sons vote Libertarian. My daughter's fairly liberal. My husband and I are pretty conservative. His parents are pretty conservative. It's a pretty diverse group of people. And I would say my sons are very conservative. They just think the government should be out of our business, and that's why they vote Libertarian. They think there's not a role for government to play. And their big argument is, name one good thing the government's done in the last 20 years that they haven't spent too much or wasted money or gotten too involved in people's businesses. And so I understand that, and I understand that thought process there. But I always tell them when they send me, because they're always sending me little clips of whatever, an article they see, whatever. And I always say, look, while I have my own problems with the mainstream media, if I have never heard of a news source, then probably we need to dig a little deeper on the story that you get. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and usually I start with kind of a Google search or whatever you use, DuckDuckGo, whatever the search engine, Safari, use a little search, and then I sort it by date. Okay, this is just a little trick to teach y'all. And that way you can see, is this the same story that's been put out 14 times? Or is it actually new reporting? That helps you find that. And I know it's a little harder because people want a 30-second clip that's going to explain everything to them. But most issues are not that way.
Yeah, most issues aren't that way. And unfortunately, I think all of us want kind of confirmation bias. And so we don't necessarily look diligently into the credibility of the source if they're saying what we want to hear sometimes. And we can all fall victim to that. So in addition to saying, okay, is this a credible source, making sure you're getting different sources, because I think you and I could agree, too, that there's some mainstream sources that on certain issues probably shouldn't be taken for their word. So it's just getting a variety and make sure you're doing your due diligence.
Well, for example, earlier I was talking about the votes this weekend on foreign aid, and I was using a New York Times source, which I know a lot of my listeners don't like the New York Times, and I think their editorial page is too far left, okay? But when it comes to charts and graphs, there's nobody better than the New York Times. Yep. Plus, you can actually search the New York Times database for more information than almost any other source of a newspaper. So there are certain things. I think their editorial page is too far left and they don't have enough diverse voices. I think that's my viewpoint on that. But many times when it comes to covering actual, especially live events, they do a really good job of sorting it out so that you can get a good snapshot of what happened.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have I know some people who write for the New York Times, and they can do a good job. To your point, when it comes to the editorial space, I have some disagreements. But again, whether it's New York Times, Washington Post, or any other, just making sure you get a variety of views and then trying to take what you want to be the truth out of what the actual facts are.
Well, and our old friend from GPB, Robert Jemison, also works at New York Times now, which is he was doing obituaries and now he's in real political reporting. Mm-hmm. So he's very happy about that. And it's good for me to see people that are long-term journalists, whether it's him or Matt Brown, who used to be with the Washington Post, who now is with AP. You know, there are people out there that are still doing old school journalism. They're just hard to find because of this kind of Snapchat minute that we're in, or the TikTok minute that we're in, where people just want to go through. And I actually did go on TikTok for a minute this last fall because I wanted to see what it was about just for myself. But right after the attacks on October 7th, I started getting really, really offensive content that was just showing up in my feed. And you know what? I said, I don't need this in my life. This is too destructive. And so I turned it off.
I did the same for different reasons, but I did the same earlier when it came to TikTok because there's a lot of interesting stuff on there, and it can be kind of just weird and addictive, like you're going down a hole kind of. And so, yeah, I just finished reading Walter Cronkott's biography, and it really brought some of those journalistic principles to bear and made me think through that.
Yeah, and Walter Cronkite did a 15-minute newscast. I think it went to 30 minutes, but that was back in the day when news didn't have to turn a profit. Okay, news is not what drove the profit of the broadcast companies. It was entertainment that drove the profit, and the news was like a public service at that point in time. Then something happened around the 80s to where they started things like they started making money on things like 60 Minutes, the magazine shows, and that kind of thing. And then they crossed the Rubicon, and the news department started to have to turn a profit. And I don't think profit is bad in general. I mean, profit drives a lot of things. But in this case, what happened was, and then 24-hour news, where you don't have, it just became this beast that had to be fed all the time. And because of that, about 40% of first reports are incorrect.
Wow. Yeah, you have to watch out for that. And that's why I think it is good to mix. I do like to mix some of the mainstream media with some independent sources. Now, there are independent sources that are not credible at all, and then there are others with some people who have come from different places that are pretty good. So, again, it's making sure that you're being diligent and that you're getting at least different points of view. I think that's helpful.
So we're in the middle of this political campaign, and we look like we're going to have the same matchup. I still think, a lot can happen between now and the conventions. I think we're pretty solid on the Republican side that it's going to be Trump. I think Robert Kennedy's going to get on enough ballots to make some sort of impact. I don't know what that's going to be. I think Jill Stein's coming to Atlanta. She usually is able to get on the ballot in a number of states with the Green Party. You got Cornel West trying to get on the ballot. And then you've got whoever the Libertarian candidate's going to be. I think Joe Biden, while he's got the delegates, all of that, I still think it's a little bit of a question mark whether, with the convention being so late, whether he'll ultimately be the nominee. But I think that's less likely than it maybe was a few months ago. I think he wants it. I think he wants to keep running. But what you're seeing in the numbers is this really interesting stuff, is that there's younger people that are saying they like Trump better than they like Biden. There's people of color saying they like Trump better than they like Biden. And it's very interesting to me because they're both really flawed people, I think. But I guess we all are.
Yeah, there's been some movement there. So I think when it comes to Biden, barring a major health crisis, I think he becomes the nominee. It's hard for me to see them push him out. I just, being in Democratic circles, don't see. I don't see the push for that. In fact, most folks are trying to convince others that all the
he's really sharp in a room by himself.
The competence issues aren't real. That's where I see people spending most of their time. Now, Chicago's a different. Being that it's in Chicago and being that Chicago is in an uproar on a lot of different things, that could be an interesting convention. Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's where I was going to go. That could be a very interesting convention. But you are seeing kind of a shift of people to Trump, at least for now. Now, we know that Trump has some other issues, and some of these folks that are shifting over there, if he's actually prosecuted, may not be there. But we'll just have to see. There's so many other things.
Well, and it's so funny where you would think it would be a benefit for Biden that he can be out there campaigning right now, and Trump is in a courtroom for 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. But then Biden goes out and tells this crazy story about how his uncle was shot down and they never recovered the body because, there's a lot of cannibals in New Guinea. And I'm like, really? Come on. Why would he think that was a good story to tell. And then the Pentagon, of course, there's a record of this. It's not that they came out with a statement, but they've made statements before about this loss. And basically his plane went down in the ocean. So it's just not true.
Yeah. Biden has.
Now, we know family lore can be something, though, you know.
Biden has a history of embellishment. We'll call it that. He's just not going to get rid. Like, that's just what he's been doing for a long time. And he's just going to keep doing that. The other thing, when you talk about the trials and the issue, a reason it might not be hitting Trump the way that it could be hitting him is you just have some overreach. I mean, if you look at what's going on in New York, it's just like, oh, you're going to give him his bail set it at a level that nobody could ever pay. People are just like, come on, guys. Like, and so things that overreach, even if some of the cases are legitimate, that overreach, I think, is helping him in ways that some
Are
might
you
not
a lawyer
expect.
by training? Do
Yes.
I remember that? Okay.
Yeah.
So my lawyer friends, and really I've gone to my more liberal lawyer friends to talk to them about this. They're all pretty much in agreement that they think a lot of these cases are big time overreach, that no one else would have been tried but him for this kind of stuff, and that it looks bad for the legal system.
I think it does look bad. Now, my opinion is the New York case seems like overreach. That's one that when you talk about discretion, it probably could have been used otherwise, and it makes it seem political. I think the case in Georgia is a little more legitimate. People might disagree there. I think there is some legitimacy to that. But either way, there's so much going on around these cases that it doesn't hit Trump in the way that it could unless he gets prosecuted, because it still seems like there's a number of people saying, I don't think I could go that far.
Justin Giboney and I are here. Justin's with the AND campaign. We were talking on the break that, this level of humility and this level of standards and people, that are good people just aren't out there anymore. They are in public service so they can make money later. Okay. And I'm not naming any names. You all know someone who does. And that's kind of the way it is. So I wanted to ask the question, and with the work you do with the AND campaign, what do you guys see as the biggest issues that we're dealing with? And then what are some answers? And I know they may not be governmental.
That's a good question. So to us, there's some really big issues out there. I think you have to look at the economy, housing, food prices is something that's really challenging for a lot of people, whether or not someone want to admit it or not. It has to be dealt with. And so we look at that. We also, as you know, we have our whole life committee where we do look at abortion and believe in the sanctity of life, but also say that we have to care about the woman and the child. I think too often we tend to push one away and just focus on the other, but these things come together, and that really is really important. And then something I've been hitting on quite a bit, poverty in general, but also parental rights. I mean, there in certain states, not as much as in Georgia, but in certain places, parental rights are really at stake. And so these are religious liberty issues also. And so those are some of the things that we do. But when you're talking about some of these issues, you got to look locally first. They used to say that all politics are local, and now all politics are national. And what we're trying to get people to do is say, what can you do in your local community? Because I know when it comes to the presidential election, a lot of people are kind of feeling powerless. Their vote doesn't matter. I think your vote does matter. But even bigger than that, I believe that what you and your community, your church or whatever do for the people around you could actually have a bigger impact on your community than who becomes the president. So
I've been saying to people that the three things you need to do is 1, vote, 2, parent your children or grandchildren, and 3, start having more face-to-face conversations with people, real people. And just kind of strike up conversations. My kids always joke about the fact, are you going to strike up a conversation with a stranger again? Well, yeah, I'm probably going to do that. That's what I do. Okay. I like to talk to people. If I'm in line, if I come across someone, whatever, I like to talk to people. I know that's a little bit, like, I don't know, old lady. I don't know what it is, but I like to do it. I'm interested in people. I like different kinds of people. So I think we're in a place. I'm glad you brought up the parental rights, and later on in the week, we're going to be talking about all the changes that's being proposed to Title IX and all the work that women like me have worked on through our whole lives. But later in the week, we're going to do that. Not today, but that you're right, that it's got to be on a community level. So remind people again, kind of, because you had an interesting journey, right? Because you were a Democratic activist, you worked with things, and now you're a pastor. And do the AND campaign. Just tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so I worked for the mayor of Atlanta. I was a Democrat for 7 to 8 years. I was running campaigns all over the city of Atlanta, was a delegate at the Democratic National Convention twice. And then I just realized, as when I looked at my faith and I looked at these parties, that I needed to distinguish myself. I didn't really feel comfortable on the right or the left. And so I had to say, well, what does it look like to think about love and truth in the public square, to care about justice, but also care about moral order? Because what we tend to do is we tend to say either you're all about justice or you're all about morality. But when I look at my faith, I think those are together, that they're actually interdependent. And so I just kind of went on a journey to say, what does it look like to not be so partisan or ideological, but to focus on justice and moral order, compassion and conviction? Because
you see church people, okay, and especially in the black church, I see certain values when I go there and values in my own church. And I hate to call it black church and white church, but you know what I'm saying when I say that. But you see certain values, but you don't see them played out in either party, really. Those kinds of values. They get some of them, but they don't get other ones. And it puts you in a challenge as a Christian.
Yeah, I worry about Christians that don't feel any tension being in a party. Right. If you're a Democrat and you don't feel any tension or any issue with the views on abortion or the views on other issues, or if you're a Republican, you don't feel any tension on the immigration issue or any of that, or just find some issue that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, that's problematic, because I think we have to question at that point, are we being critical thinkers, or have we kind of outsourced our public witness to a party? And so we would ask people to say, okay, you can be in a party. We're not saying you can't do that. But are you thinking based on principles rather than just the party agenda and narrative?
Yeah, and you mentioned immigration for a minute, and I think what's interesting about that is that, look, the United States of America, when they follow their laws, which right now we're not, we immigrate about 1.3 million people a year into this country, which is more than the rest of the world combined. So I don't think you can say by anybody's definition that we're anti-immigrant. Okay, as far as the law goes. But we're not following the law right now. And on top of that, you've got 2 million, I don't know what the number is, but a large number of people that are coming across the border that aren't coming in the legal way. They're coming in, and you have the terrible thing that happened to Laken Riley, and where this guy was not undocumented. Mm-hmm. He had interacted with the law in a whole bunch of places, but didn't go through with it. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, this discussion plays out, and who can couch it in a fair way, but also a truthful way.
Yeah, and a few weeks ago, I wrote an article in Christianity Today about just that. I'm no huge fan of the way that Biden has handled immigration, but I will also say, the way that someone like Senator Ted Cruz and others have treated the issue, where they, what he did, you can even go back to what he did to Rubio in that regard. That's no way to conduct yourself. So for me, I would feel a little bit of tension based on some of the rhetoric and also the stance that some folks have taken. But we all have to, again, I think the big issue is that we all have to be willing to critique our side and not just go along to get along.
Absolutely. Justin Giboney, if people want to know more about you, how can they find that out?
You can see us at the andcampaign.org, andcampaign.org, or you can go to some of my social media at Justin E. Giboney. Justin E. Giboney.
Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Chris Carr is here with me right now. He is our Attorney General, and I had the great chance of getting to see him speak yesterday at the Gainesville Rotary Club, and we're happy to welcome him this morning. Welcome, Chris.
Good morning, Martha. Always great to be with you, and it was great to see you yesterday at Rotary.
Yeah, and I tell you what, we got this beautiful new studio that's right on the square, and we're back to where we started 75 years ago.
Well, and congratulations on the 75th anniversary and the new studio. Hopefully I can come by one day and actually sit in the studio with you. We can do this interview.
That would be great. That would be great. So you mentioned yesterday a case that Hall County Sheriff's Department cooperated with the Attorney General's office, and I just wanted you to give the folks a few details on that one, and then let's talk about some of the other big cases that you've had over recently.
Yeah, and Martha, when it comes to human trafficking, I mean, this is a great example of being able to partner with different law enforcement agencies, partner with different prosecutors around the federal, state, and local level. But in this particular case, we worked with Sheriff Gerald Couch and his folks to successfully prosecute and convict 3 men who were in the country illegally and who'd purchased, an underage victim for sex. And it was a Fulton and Cherokee County case that they assisted. And I don't want to get into too many details on that, but I can't thank them enough. The sheriff did a great job and the team. But again, when we're talking about some of the most vulnerable in our society, this isn't a partisan issue. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. It's a way that we can all work together to make sure that our children are being safe. And I cannot thank the sheriff's office enough for what they did to help us.
Well, we had Commissioner John King in here last week, and he was talking about the Ibarra case related to the Laken Riley murder. And he said that what they learned from that was that, these two brothers had been victimizing their community first with lots of small petty crimes that they may not have been arrested for. But that part of the reason why they were able to catch him so quickly was that the community cooperated and helped with information, and then we were able to get him arrested quickly. But it's that community of color, and I think especially these illegal immigrant communities, they get victimized first before they go out into the wider world.
Well, and I've said this about, and I'm not going to suggest that this is happening in the Athens case. It may or may not be, but I'm just talking about at the 50,000-foot level. If you're talking about gang activity or you're talking about violent crime, who are the communities that are most often terrorized by this violent crime, these gangs? It's lower income, racially diverse, and immigrant populations. Again, this should not be a Republican, Democrat, conservative, or liberal issue. It's a human need to be safe. You want safe schools and safe streets. You want your community to be safe. You want to be safe. So, again, there's a reason that constitutionally in our state we say it's the primary function of government to protect person and property. That means all Georgians, no matter your race, your gender, sexual orientation, where you live, or where you're from, you deserve to feel and to be safe. And so, again, I'm actually proud of the fact that we Republicans in this state, from Governor Kemp to the legislature and Governor Deal beforehand, believed in this that we need to be protecting all Georgians. And we need to be the ones that are at the forefront and now having human trafficking and gangs, domestic terrorism. I'm proud that we're in the fight to do just that.
We're talking to Chris Carr. He is the Attorney General for Georgia. Prior to that, he practiced law for a bit. He was Chief of Staff for Johnny Isakson. He headed up the Department of Economic Development, and then he has been elected twice to be Attorney General. And he's changed. You've transformed that Attorney General's department from being a good Attorney General's office that represented agencies and did all the things Attorney General's offices are supposed to do, but you've taken it to another level where we are really trying to prevent these large, heinous crimes.
Well, I appreciate you saying it, and I think that's true. Anybody that has seen the AG's office, we've been a good civil practice, but now because of the support of the governor and the legislature and getting these resources, I think we've become a very effective and vibrant criminal practice on issues that are statewide in nature. Again, human trafficking, gangs. We're now going to have an organized retail and cyber crime unit. Again, an issue that impacts folks all across the state. Opioids. And in fact, in one of our cases, we just had an announcement last week in Augusta. We announced the indictment of 30 defendants, 333 charges. And one of the issues is we recovered 15 pounds of fentanyl, which is enough to kill 3.5 million people. That's about a quarter of our state. But, because we can do this, we got to declare war on fentanyl. This is an issue, Martha, again, doesn't matter your race, gender, where you live in the state. This is an issue that impacts everybody, and it truly impacts individuals and families and communities. But now we have this ability through our gang unit to really go after it, and we're going to continue to do so.
So last week you had a big indictment in Augusta. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's the one, and I'm really, really proud. This is, again, another great example of working together, with all different levels of law enforcement. That's this is the 30 defendants. These are the 333 charges that we've gotten. It was everything, from drugs and guns, attempted murder, you name it. It's something that we've been working on for months. We've got offices now in Atlanta and Augusta and Albany, and we're going to expand to Columbus, Macon, and Savannah. But this is really an example of the prosecutor and the investigator that we had embedded in Augusta, and it stemmed from a dispute between two gangs, and it kind of grew from there. And as a part of it, we had an 8-year-old girl that was shot, and we're seeing that. We saw it in Athens. We just recently, there was a 3-year-old that was shot and killed. We've had, Columbus. We've seen children that are being impacted. And that's the problem with this gang activity. It's not just about the gangs themselves. The violence isn't contained to them. It's really anybody in the community can be impacted by it. But really proud of the indictment that we had in over in Augusta. It's a big case, but it just goes to show we're going to put the resources, forward to make sure that we're keeping everybody in this state safe, and we're going to continue to do it.
So we've got a huge problem at the border. Congress doesn't seem to be able to get anything done. The president toys with the idea of reinstating executive orders, but he doesn't seem to be doing anything. But you've enjoined in some cases related to the border, and you've also been very active in fentanyl seizures. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Martha, this is the thing that's frustrating. I mean, you've worked with folks in Washington, and again, I said the primary function of the state government is to protect personal property of the state, but the paramount duty of the federal government constitutionally is defending the nation, and immigration is part of that. And there is no doubt that we have a problem at the border right now, and as a result of these policies, the Biden administration's policies, we're seeing an increase in gangs, we're seeing an increase in human trafficking, and an increase in fentanyl. All of which are deadly and dangerous. And I know it's frustrating, but, Congress needs to do its job. Congress needs to go back, and if the bill was bad that they were debating, I'm good with that, but you got to roll your sleeves back up and go to work, because Congress is supposed to be the first among equals, and that they need to be doing it. The president can do more. He absolutely can do more right now to secure the border. And instead of going after Texas for trying to defend itself, because if the federal government's not going to do its job, we are all border states. But certainly Texas trying to defend himself, they should be working with them, not fighting against them. And then again, if the Biden administration is going to continue to go outside of its constitutional authority and engage in practices like, not deporting people that have run the course that are violent criminals, then, we tried to maintain the Remain in Mexico policy, which to me was common sense. They fought it. We're going to continue to sue them, and we've continued to win. The problem, Martha, is they'll come back, 3, 6, 9 months later, literally just change a few words in the regulation and go on and reinstitute what they're doing, because they're just playing crass politics. They know it. Instead of going to Congress and working with Congress, the activists within the administration are just doing what they can, particularly now in an election year, to score political points.
Well, I mean, and the thing that's so frustrating to me is that President Trump did a better job with the exact same laws on the books, but President Obama did too. Do a better job with the exact same laws on the books. So you can't say that you can't do anything with the laws that they currently have, okay? Because Obama would institute crisis talks if it got to more than 1,000 people coming across the border in any one day. He was called the deporter in chief. There's a lot of things I disagree with him about, but he was pretty tough on immigration, even though he didn't talk about it very much. Donald Trump took it to a bigger level as far as getting people through that. But the law is in place. If we follow the law, we'll do a better job.
That's right. And you see the priorities of an administration through their actions. And again, this President Biden could do more right now just based on national security. Again, we don't know who's coming across the border. A month or two ago, 60 Minutes did a piece on how many Chinese nationals were coming over the border. We don't know. We had, I think it was Chris Wray or Homeland Security Mayorkas or somebody saying, well, we can't tell you how many ISIS members have come across. We just don't know. That's fundamentally defending this nation. And I'm not anti-immigration. I mean, again, so many of us are children and grandchildren of immigrants, and there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. But one is you need to come through the door, not the window. And two, we got to secure the border first. But yes, agriculture is the number one industry in the state. There's got to be a common sense way to be able to have workers based on, economic factors. But you're never going to be able to do it. You're not going to get to that point if you don't do the fundamentals, and that's defending the nation.
It's about priorities. My grandmother came here in 1903. I can pull up the document that she used coming into Ellis Island with her name on it, how much money she had, where she was going, whether she had a job or not. I mean, this was in 1903, Chris. They had this record. Both times she came into the United States, they were processing 1 million people a year through Ellis Island. And there were only about a population of 75 million in America, and they were doing it by hand. Okay, you can do it if you want to, all right? And then the Bracero program, which happened until the early 1950s, was another by-hand program that Eisenhower ended because the men were coming back from Korea, and they needed jobs for them. But it was 400,000 ag workers a year that were coming back and forth. And they basically were the same ones every year, and they kept track of them by hand, okay? If you want to do it, you can do it. And, the Trump administration got the children that were not with their parents down to only 500. And those 500, their parents didn't want them. Their parents or their family members didn't want them. So it's a horrible thing, but they could do it if they wanted to. It's all about priorities. Now, finally, I want to ask you about the Retail and Cybercrime Prosecution Unit and how you're going to be able to stand that up.
Yeah, this is a big deal. You've seen the smash and grabs that have occurred in California and elsewhere around the state, elsewhere around the country. What we're seeing is organized groups of people that are hitting brick and mortar stores and then reselling online. And there's a lot the legislature's done from a civil perspective, and we can do some things there. But these are literally organized groups that are stealing from companies that are trying to do it the right way. And it's become a violent issue. You've seen customers knocked over. You've seen employees knocked over. And at a time, when workforce is the number one issue, now you got to have employees that are worried about their public safety. Well, this is an issue, again, that it really is statewide in nature. We're seeing cargo theft. We're seeing it all across the board. Because we have the ability to prosecute gangs, organized retail crime is a part of it. And I think with us being the number one state in the nation in which to do business, this is a way that we can further that by protecting businesses that are doing it the right way. So by July the 1st, we've got 11 positions that we're going to be able to focus on. A lot of it is online. Cybercrime, again, Martha, a huge issue. You have scams, not just the retail side, but just scams against, our elderly citizens, against, you and me, texts, emails that we're getting, $320 million. Georgians lost last year to cybercrime. But this, again, we're going to have to work hand in hand with our federal, state, and local partners. But I think this is a great way to protect businesses that are trying to do it the right way, as well as customers and employees.
So just to shift gears in the final question a little bit, you're doing a lot of traveling around the state, as you always do, but you don't just speak to political groups. You speak to Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs and Optimist clubs and all of these kinds of things around the state. What's your sense of what the mood is out there in Georgia right now?
I think people are concerned about the country. They're concerned about the world that we live in, but they're proud of Georgia. And I said it yesterday, Martha, and it's really true. I think the way that we have done things over particularly the last 4 years, and the governor deserves just a tremendous amount of credit, as does the legislature. We've had good conservative leadership. Coming out of a global health pandemic with an economic crisis, social justice unrest, and the historically contested election. But look at the way that we governed, the way that we partnered with the public and the private sector. I think people are proud of Georgia. I think they're worried about the nation. I do think they're worried about elections because, you've been in politics a long time, and the polarization. This isn't just about individuals. It's about philosophy. Do you believe in a border that's secure? Do you believe in the power of the free enterprise system and bringing down inflation? Because right now, people talk about going to the grocery store, how expensive it is to go to the grocery store. Public safety. Do you believe that criminals should be held accountable, or are you going to look the other way? These are pretty fundamental to who we are in this American experiment. So I think people are proud of what we've done in Georgia and are very concerned about what's going on around the country and around the world.
Absolutely. Chris Carr, thanks for being with me today. I appreciate it so much.
Martha, always great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.